So James is saying, my question is, who were they in Genesis 6:2, sons of God? Were they angels or humankind?
This is a big debate.
Yeah, it is a big debate. And, I can only share my personal opinion. I know that, everybody has their own thoughts on this, but just based on what I see in the Bible, I'm going to say that they're most likely just humankind. Because if you look at Genesis 6:2, basically the context is it says that the son, in verse 1 actually says, it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them. So, after Adam and Eve had, sinned and people were beginning to multiply. In verse 2, it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair or beautiful, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And so when you look in the Bible and you look at that phrase, sons of God, and I know this, people have said different things, I understand, but when I see that phrase, sons of God, I can't help but look at, things like Philippians chapter 2, where in verse 15, it says, that you might be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. Again, that verse, sons of God talks about basically in Romans 8:14, it says, as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. And so simply to me, what I read when I read this verse, it's saying that there were God's people, and then there was and that was the line of Seth. Those were people that began to worship that started to worship God again after Seth was born. Him and his generation started to worship God, and you see that in the line, like Enoch is one of his descendants, and then Enoch, begat, I believe is it Methuselah, which is the father of Noah. And so you see that this was the line, the lineage of God's people
Or
in the
Lamech
line
was
of
in there too.
Seth. However, in Cain, and who else?
Oh, Lamech was in that lineage too.
Yeah,
Enoch,
exactly. There
Methuselah,
was there
Lamech.
was
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And it's funny because there's a Lamech on Cain's side too, I believe. And so, and if you look at Cain's lineage, I mean, these were people that were like brought in polygamy, brought in more
Mhm.
murdering, thieves. They were just terrible. They were that's what I believe. The sons of God is talking about the line of Seth, God's people, God's remnant people that were still going to stay faithful to him. Those, or at least they were supposed to. They were from that family line of people that were supposed to be the sons of God, that were supposed to be led by the Spirit. But it says, and the sons of God saw the daughters of men, mankind, the world, basically worldly women, that they were fair, they were pretty, they put more effort into, their looks and whatnot, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. And this was kind of the beginning of the end, which is where, basically the whole world became corrupted, because you had who were supposed to be God's people, staying faithful to God, being led by his Spirit, but they desired something they shouldn't, which was, unbelievers. And so they married these women who were not believers. And then you bring, you can't do marriage evangelism. And so basically it just corrupted both families. And you have, basically one last family, Noah, as the last people on earth, known as family as the last people on earth who would, be faithful to God and be saved. And that's why you see only 8 people get into this ark. So I do believe that, this is why the whole world had gotten corrupted. I don't think this was, I know some people say this is Naphtali, this is angels, that the sons of God were like, the angels or people from other planets or something. I don't think so. I think this was God's line of people who are supposed to be focused on, God's word and on being led by a Spirit. But I think they made that mistake of an ungodly marriage, and that is the beginning of a lot of problems. And you see that throughout the Bible. Look at the life of Solomon. Look at, Samson. It's, the Adam, even Adam was the purest man. Samson was the strongest man. And, Solomon was the wisest man. And they all fell by desiring of a woman that, or, obeying a woman that they shouldn't. So I think, it tells a lot of the power women have over the spiritual walk of men. And it is a very important responsibility that godly women have to keep their husbands, or point their husbands, or point the men in their lives in the right direction. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope that you have more questions to come. Jay, already anything else on that one?
Yeah, and I think even just looking at the text of Genesis 6:4, like you started there, and just to go back again, like it to reinforce, it says, the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. And what do we know about the children? It says the same became mighty men. So their children are men. He said, and then it repeats it, men of renown. It doesn't say that like some other new thing.
Mhm.
Yes, it uses Nephilim at the beginning. It says there were giants on the earth, but yeah, Nephilim means giants. We don't have to construct like, oh, there's this some other new species out there. So if we really apply Occam's razor, what's the simplest, most straightforward explanation for what this is? It really is, yeah. The Cain's lineage merged with Seth's lineage, and it really led to just a spiritual corruption of mankind, necessitating the flood. And um, you know, people really have to rely on then extra biblical sources written like just before Jesus was born, like the Book of Enoch and these sorts of books, to come up with these other doctrines
Mhm.
that just don't really add to the spiritual story that God's trying to tell us.
Yeah, no.
And the warning is, yeah, don't mix with non-Christians, don't or people who are completely of a different faith.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like a lot of people said, like, oh, these are angels, but Jesus says himself in Matthew 22, verse 30, he talks about, in the resurrection in heaven, he says, in the resurrection, we neither marry or are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven.
Mhm.
And so this definitely it's saying angels don't get married. So
Yeah. In
I
First
think,
Corinthians 15, it talked about, even upon the resurrection, we're going to have a different body. We have an earthly body right now, and then there'll be a spiritual body. He says there's all sorts of different bodies. And why
yeah,
do we think that somehow there's this ability to merge and mix with them? Like there's and why do we only see this happening in Genesis 6 and never again? Of course, the Enoch story is like, well, God was so upset that then he really, really penalized those people, so everybody learned a lesson, I guess. But it just doesn't really. But then how do you end up with the Nephilim again after the flood? So it gets really weird when you
yeah.
don't go with the most simple explanation here.